wanting to get a real shower, not a Gatorade bath, because I want to get focused on Alabama. They got a 5-6 hour head start. So I'm not, I'll be honest with you guys, I'm not interested in celebrating that. We'll look back on that win, and that'll be great, but we're focused on the task ahead. That's the objective, and that's what our guys, they worked their tail off for 3 to 4 weeks to get this opportunity. And it was a 1-game season, and now it's another 1-game season. I'm not focused on Gatorade baths.
Josh, do you support some kind of mandatory cooling off period for injured players before returning to the game, or is that something it's just a reality of the sport in this era?
You know what's crazy is the officials wanted that tonight. I thought that was pretty comical that they came up and said that to me.
That feeling of tomorrow morning, and you're University of Arkansas, and you're in our state, Arkansas, and you're proud of the Razorbacks. That's what I felt whenever they were giving KJ his trophy and the team ours. And to be Outback Bowl champions with 9 wins, I'm really, really proud of our team with what we've accomplished. 2 of the teams that beat us also were pretty good last night. So we play in a heck of a league, and I'm proud to be. And I said it a long time ago, we're in the SEC West, right where Arkansas belongs, and we're starting to prove that.
Oh, welcome in to the latest episode of that SEC podcast. I'm your host, Michael Bratton. I go by SEC Mike on Twitter. And man, do we got a great show today. News around the SEC. Got a great guest, my buddy Trey Wallace from Outkick.com, coming back to the show to talk some SEC. And of course, the Bryan Harsin Auburn saga continues to roll on. Apologies, not having a show yesterday. I know I said I was going to try to get 5 out this week, but hey, I got hurt. I got hurt at the gym. They told me going to the gym, get healthy. It's not working out too well for me. I hurt my back. Legitimately here, if you're watching on YouTube, I got a walking cane here. If you're just listening, that's the walking cane bumping the mic there. But man, I am all out of sorts here. I'm leaning back on the show to record. Is about the only way I can sit up is by leaning back. So apologies, but I may have to have a new sponsor on the show, Icy Hot, because I'm going through those bad boys. I got to be helping their stock at this point with how many Icy Hots I put on my lower back the last couple of days after. I don't know what the hell I did even. I'm lifting weights, and next thing you know, sitting down all day at a computer and excruciating pain. So, hey, I'm not going to complain. I'm one of the luckiest guys in the world. If this is not even real work what I'm doing, yet I get paid to do it. So I'm soldiering on here. Got to get through the news while we got some content to get to, because I know the dark days of the off season when we'll have nothing to talk about are right around the corner. So, hey, we got to get you back with your fix of daily SEC action, and we'll get right into it here. But before we get to the news, I just thought this was fantastic. We always love to start with something fun if we can, and if you missed it, this is something we talked about. This was about a month ago, the Steve Spurrier Award. This is one of the first times. I think they've done it one other time, but this is only the second time in the 20-so-odd years they've been giving this award out. It's an annual award that goes to a first-year coach, not a first-time coach. That's been very confusing for some people, but it's first-year coach to win an award. They gave it to 2 coaches, Shane Beamer, South Carolina, Josh Heupel, Tennessee, 2 of the best coaches, obviously not only in the SEC but in the country, split this Steve Spurrier first-year coach award. And Steve Spurrier himself went down to Columbia recently to give Shane Beamer his trophy, and he got to troll them North Carolina Tar Heels in the process. So let's kick it over to Steve Spurrier giving Shane Beamer the Steve Spurrier First-Year Coach of the Year award.
About a year and a half ago, a guy named Mike Griffith called me up, and he said, "Coach, we want to name a Coach of the Year award after you, and it goes to the coach in first year at a school." And I said, I like that. I like that because a lot of first-year coaches come in with all the excuses. Man, we're in disarray. This is going to take 2 or 3 years. But that's not what Coach Beamer came in and said. He did not, hey, instead of instead of gloom and doom, he came in and taught these guys some discipline, accountability, effort, all that kind of stuff that winners have. And pretty soon, as the season progressed, we had a damn good team here at South Carolina. You know that. But the big one, the game, South Carolina was picked next to the bottom in preseason, down there next to Vanderbilt. But at the end of the year, they were up there in the top half with a winning record. But again, the big win, in my opinion, was the Mayonnaise Bowl up in Charlotte. Both teams went up there 6-6. One of them was going to go home a winner, and the other one a loser. And our Gamecocks gave those Tar Heels a solid trouncing up there in Charlotte in baseball. So it's my honor to give the, I think we call it the Steve Spurrier Coach of the Year, to Shane Beamer, South Carolina.
Coach Spurrier wanted to thank Mike McGee for hiring him. I want to thank Coach Spurrier for bringing me to Columbia, South Carolina back in 2007. Any individual award is only because of the people around you, and I've got some amazing people around me, from our board to our administration, Coach Ray Tanner, our athletic director, Chance Miller, our amazing players, our amazing coaches, staff, the cockpit, and all of Gamecock Nation. I'm so thankful and grateful and honored to be your head football coach. Like I've talked about before, year one was just the beginning for us. It was a good start, but it's certainly not the pinnacle. We're just getting started, and I can't wait for many, 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 many more years with you. Go Gamecocks.
Now, old Spurrier, the head ball coach, he cannot say anything without trolling somebody. So it's always a question of who he's going to troll during one of his appearances. So I love the fact that he mocked the Tar Heels, which, if you remember, Shane and I, we thought South Carolina would put up a decent fight but lose in the end. I think that's what most people thought, yet the Gamecocks whooped that ass, and hey, credit to them. And that's probably in large part why Shane Beamer got this first-year Coach of the Year award from Steve Spurrier. So I just thought that was fantastic. But, of course, the big topic here in the SEC, the drama continues on the plane. So let's jump down there, give you guys the latest. And, we've seen some wild and wacky stuff in the SEC, but this is quickly turning into one of the biggest shit shows that we've seen in years. And if you missed it, this was revealed on Wednesday. Got to credit Bud Elliott over there at 24/7 Sports for calling attention to this. But if you missed it, Auburn they've changed their policy, and it was on Tuesday. They enacted this on Tuesday, or at least they uploaded it publicly to their Auburn EDU website, basically saying all employees have a duty to cooperate fully and faithfully with all investigations, otherwise they face termination. And why is that important? And also, I'll throw it up on the YouTube. I mean, it's literally a one-page document. Usually when a school makes such a big policy change or something like that, I mean, we're talking pages and pages, which would lead one to believe they threw this up as quickly as possible. And we all knew that there was an investigation going on at Auburn. What they're trying to do, they're trying to find some reason to fire Bryan Harsin without giving him his full $18 million buyout. And, of course, he's been on vacation down in Mexico, and whatever investigation they got going on, he has not taken part, at least to this point. He is, I believe on Wednesday, he arrived back at Auburn. So, you're just kind of reading in between the lines here, and they putting out this new policy. You got to cooperate with all investigations. Otherwise, you're in violation of your coaching contract. It doesn't say Bryan Harsin on this document, but clearly, that's who they're pinpointing. You got to come in. You got to come talk to us. You got to give us everything you know. And, hey, leave it to SEC fans. You're the best. It was a nanosecond after this was released that Auburn was doing this. They said, well, what the hell? Bruce Pearl, who I know he's untouchable at this point. I love Bruce Pearl. I'm not going to say anything bad about him. Number one team in the country. Well, they were until they lost to Arkansas, but still, Final Four contender, SEC, current leader. Auburn Tigers doing an amazing job in basketball, but it wasn't that long ago. It was about a season or two ago where there was an investigation at Auburn, and Bruce said, to hell with that. I ain't cooperating with it. So SEC fans quick to point out that rules for Bruce, maybe not the rules for Bryan Harsin. And hey, if you needed no other evidence that they're turning over every rock to try to get this man out from under his contract. There you go. I mean, they're putting new policies in. I cannot recall a time when such a thing took place. And, you got to believe these are already in coaching contracts, yet the power these guys get, the money they get, their agents, the way they're able to manipulate these contracts, maybe this wasn't in there, but it's too coincidental for this to leak here on a Tuesday in the middle of this investigation, right as Bryan Harsin coming back from his vacation, which I'm told he's already back at Auburn now. And one other final thing to note here, there's a big meeting of all the SEC coaches at the SEC offices in Birmingham on Thursday. And according to Brandon Marcello of 24/7 Sports, he is saying, according to his sources, that Harsin is letting people know, hey, I'll be at the meeting. So as far as Bryan Harsin is concerned, he is Auburn's football coach. And unfortunately, these meetings are closed-door meetings at the SEC offices. I don't think there's any way a reporter sneaks into them or anything like that and gets any questions in under Harsin or any video. So I don't think you're even going to hear any information from this. But if he shows up, that just goes to show that he is fully committed to being Auburn's coach. Now, that doesn't mean he will be, but man, there's no telling what they're looking for, what they're going to try to uncover here. But messy situation down here on the plains, and we'll keep you guys posted as new information comes to light. And it seems like every day new information, and I'm sure we'll get something by the end of the week to share, no doubt. But all right, hey, that's enough of me spieling about the story everyone's waiting to finally conclude here on the plains. Let's kick it to our interview with Trey Wallace, Outkick.com. Got to touch on a number of SEC teams. Really appreciate Trey giving me so much time here in the middle of the week. Give you guys some SEC content. Well, we're pleased to once again be joined by my buddy Trey Wallace. Gotta give him a follow at Trey Wallace _ on Twitter. And of course, he covers the SEC for Outkick.com, one of the best sites on the planet for SEC football coverage. Trey, thanks for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's great to be on with you, brother. And it's never a dull moment in this conference, as we've noticed.
Yeah, no doubt. And, one of the things that you've hit on here recently over at Outkick, of course, the topic everybody is currently discussing, Bryan Harsin and what's going on there at Auburn. Can you believe that we've got to this point after just 1 year? And what do you make of all this drama on the plains?
It's weird. Again, like nothing surprises me in the SEC, but I would say, after I don't know, 12 months, 13 months in the conference that we're having a conversation about a school like Auburn that's most likely going to be looking for a new head coach for their football program. It's weird, man. It's something you don't think about when you take a job like that. You don't think the turnaround time might end up actually being only a year. It's become apparent to a lot of people that they don't think that Bryan Harsin can do the job when it comes to recruiting, and also the job of being the head coach at Auburn, which it entails much more than just doing stuff on the field. I think that when you get into a situation where maybe you're not the pick from the power players around the program, but maybe you're the pick from, the athletic director inside the program. And that's a risk you take. Michael, and you know this, when you shut out the people that bring in the money or that give the money, and you want to make this pick on your own, you are taking a little bit of a risk, but you would think athletic departments around the country should do this a little bit more often. I think we're in a situation right now with Auburn where they looked at, okay, and you start 6-2,
Mm-hmm.
but you look at where we stand right now, and everything's kind of taking a 180 from coordinators leaving to players leaving. Derek Mason taking a pay cut to go to Stillwater and get out of the SEC. Just a lot of stuff is built up to this point, man, and it's kind of shocking. But you know what? This conference, every day, like I said, there's nothing dull about it, and it is kind of weird that we're talking about it, but at the same time, you know what? It's Auburn, and down there, things are just run a little bit differently.
Yeah, no doubt. And, having said that, I recently talked to my buddy Brian Stoltz. He covers Auburn for auburnsports.com. He is a personal friend with Hugh Freeze, and, so obviously he's a little biased there. But, I asked him if Hugh is offered this job, would he take it? He says 100%, no doubt. So what are your thoughts on that? And to your knowledge, would the SEC, would they even be, allow Auburn to make such an offer? I say all that. I have no idea if Auburn is really even interested in Hugh Freeze, because it seems like every job opening, there's Hugh's available, Hugh's interested. So, this may be him just trying to get his name back in the mix. But, considering the situation Auburn's in, I don't know that they could do much better than Hugh Freeze at this point. What are your thoughts on all that?
No, I don't know either, especially with the timing that we're sitting in right now. I mean, it's the month of February, and you got spring practice starting, next month. Hugh Freeze would take the job at Auburn, and he'd bring his staff down there, and they'd get to work. He'd get back in the SEC. From my understanding and talking with folks over the last year or so, the SEC is not going to really, what's the best way to put it? They're not going to, they're not going to put their foot inside the door and where it doesn't close. This is something that the SEC is, I guess, over with is maybe a strong way to put it. But if Auburn wanted to go out and hire Hugh Freeze, they can go out and hire Hugh Freeze. Now, does that play out on the Plains? That's the interesting part of it. Another key thing here too is you have to remember, who are these guys that are going to be available? Who's gonna pick up and leave a team in February? To go coach in the Southeastern Conference. There's only a handful of names out there that I think would do that at the moment, and I think that Hugh Freeze is one of them. I think he would. Look, honestly, he'd probably be a solid hire for Auburn. Keep his nose clean, do the right thing down there. You could turn that thing around. And, to me, it would be somewhat of like a better Gus Malzahn in a way. That's how I kind of look at Hugh Freeze. I don't think there's going to be any problems with that if they decide to go down that route, if they decide to fire Harsin and move in a different direction. But I do think Hugh Freeze gets back in the Southeastern Conference one day. It's just going to be about which team decides to pull the trigger first. And if Auburn waits around again, okay, are they going to be, looking back on it and thinking, oh, we should have done this back in February when we had a chance if Harsin was fired.
Mm-hmm. Now, moving on from just the Auburn situation, I know a topic you've covered over at Outkick is, of course, NIL. And how about Jimbo Fisher, man? I mean, he came out guns a-blazing here on National Signing Day, really taking exception to all the speculation on how much the Aggies are paying and why they, why they landed the number one class primarily because of NIL. He does not believe that to be the case. What's your thoughts on Jimbo, taking that strong a stance and why it certainly seems Nick Saban and Kirby Smart, who it's not like they stopped recruiting. I mean, they got outstanding classes of their own, but it certainly seems between those three, there's a little bit of a battle behind the scenes. And then we could throw in Lane Kiffin in the mix too, because he's made it quite clear that, it seems like he's against these players making their decisions based purely on NIL.
Here's the thing about Jimbo Fisher. I get when you land a historical recruiting class like he did, he's not going to look. He doesn't want to come out and say, "Yeah, NIL did everything for us," and I understand that. I get that, but in talking with some folks about this around the conference and some assistant coaches, you got to start embracing this thing. It's not going anywhere. It's only going to get crazier. Right. And the fact that Jimbo Fisher wanted to make it out like NIL had nothing to do with all these top players coming to Texas A&M, like that's hogwash. Okay, I understand that you have to give praise to your assistant coaches and your recruiting staff, and you can do that. You can do that at the same time while saying, yes, NIL played a factor in some of the recruits we have, but guess what? It's going to be like this in the future. If Jimbo would have said something like that, like, hey, look, we've got the best NIL program in the country. We got the best coaching staff in the country. We play in College Station in front of over 100,000 people. Like, that's how you phrase it. You don't come out and phrase it and attack everybody for talking about NIL in your recruiting class. I mean, I've talked to people about some of the figures that Texas A&M players are getting down in College Station, and that's all fine and dandy because it's legal. You can do this now. I think his rant, his rant was more or less, in my opinion, too, a shot at Lane Kiffin for coming out the day earlier and talking about how some teams have 5 to 10 times more money than Ole Miss has when it comes to NIL. And, Lane Kiffin was agitated and he wanted to complain a little bit, but, I didn't see him complaining when Jackson Dart, ended up at Ole Miss, or, they land a tight end as well, or they land Zach Evans as well, from the transfer portal. Like, I think there's a very, very big difference in how things are playing out, even at both schools. Georgia and Alabama, they're going to keep doing what they're doing. They're going to have, their NIL deals are just as good as, what's going on at Texas A&M. But the fact that Jimbo Fisher just wants to come out and slam anybody that says something about it and talks about, that $30 million class, and they got it from a guy named Sliced Bread. To be honest with you, Michael, it just felt like Jimbo Fisher wanted to argue about something. And in my opinion, just a big difference than putting it all on NIL, but then also, giving the credit where credit's due, the recruiting staff and the coaches. I get what he was trying to do, and I know what he was trying to say, but it came off in a really bad way that I didn't understand why he decided to go down that road. I understand that, I do understand that some coaches were kind of going after him, subtly taking shots, and that's fine. You got to have thick skin in this conference. But NIL and Texas A&M, they're going to continue to roll like this because there's money down there. There's money from boosters and donors to be able to help in these situations to make them one of the top programs in the country when it comes to this. So my opinion on that is, Michael, you better just embrace it, because if you don't, you're making yourself look bad in the process. And also, by the way, you're not highlighting the NIL process that you have at your own school. So, in some ways, in some respects, I understand what he was getting at. And just because Nick Saban and Kirby Smart don't come out and flaunt it and don't want to come out and talk about it a lot and say, the complete opposite of what other coaches around the country are talking about NIL, doesn't mean that the same thing's not happening in Athens or happening in Tuscaloosa that's clearly going on in College Station.
Now, I really wanted to ask you about the SEC East, because that, I think, is a fascinating division next season with, I think it's probably safe to assume Georgia is going to be picked once again to win it, but you got to think that with the losses they're suffering on the defensive side of the ball, maybe they regress a little bit to the pack. But when I'm thinking the most interesting aspect of this is Kentucky coming off a 10-win season, so many guys returning, Tennessee, under Josh Heupel, the arrows pointed up. Same with Shane Beamer at South Carolina. And I'm not ready to write off Eli Drinkwitz. I know they were disappointing last season, but Missouri's got a lot to like about the future of that program. And then, of course, you got to throw in Billy Napier and everything he's doing down there in Florida. How interesting is it going to be next season to see how that division shakes out? Because I think you can make an argument for basically any of those teams in any order.
I think it's going to be interesting when it comes to, like you kind of talked about a little bit, what kind of drop-off do we see in Georgia? I know that they have the talent, at that second-string spot, third-string spot, and they'll develop players. But I am interested to see what the defense looks like when you lose, a number of players. What does the offense look like? Let's look at the wide receiver room. Pickens is gone. Jermaine Burton's gone. I know they have their quarterback and Stetson Bennett. We'll see how long that lasts if we go through that again. In running backs, they'll fill in players. But I look at the rest of the Southeastern Conference and the Eastern Division, and I think that, look, we'll start off with Shane Beamer. I think Shane Beamer did a fantastic job in the transfer portal. I think he did a good job when it comes to recruiting and getting some pieces that he needs. Looks like he's got his quarterback for the future in Spencer Rattler. Bring in a stud tight end after spring practice and Austin Stockton. You look at what they can do on the offensive side of the football, and I think, at times last year they took some nice steps on defense. I do. That's still a work in progress, in my opinion. But taking a look at what else that we've seen go on when it comes to the conference. So in the division, look at Tennessee. Tennessee brings back Hendon Hooker. The biggest thing about Tennessee, too, is you don't have to go into another offseason worrying about who your starting quarterback is. Mm-hmm. Like, I think that's, when's the last time you've been able to say that about Tennessee football, where there hasn't been a quarterback controversy coming off one season and heading into another? Like, I think that's key. They've got to go find help at the wide receiver spot. You've got players like Jalen Hyatt. You've got Cedric Tillman returning. It'd be good for a player maybe like Jimmy Callaway to step up. Or what does Walker Merrill do? Is he somebody that can fill into that slot position? So Tennessee's got guys on offense, especially at running back. Defensive wise, they've still got some work to do on defense. They do. Got to get help when it comes to linebacker, get help along the line of scrimmage. I think the transfer portal will be kind to them after spring practice, just like last year at the secondary spot in defensive backfield. Remember last year they added Brendan Turnage and then they added Haddon from Auburn. And, I think Tennessee will hit that hard after spring practice. So we'll see what the defense looks like, next year. And again, you talked about it. We'll see what Missouri does with, how do they go about their quarterback situation? Is it Macon? Is it Brady Cook? What does Eli Drinkwitz do next year when it comes, especially losing Tyler Beatty? But I think they can still hang around mid-pack. But to me, the biggest eyes I want to see is, okay, how does Billy Napier get off the ground at Florida with the talent that they do have on offense still? And they've got some studs on defense, but they got to work them in and develop them a little more. And then what does Kentucky do as an encore? Like that's one of the key things for me. Like we saw what Kentucky did this season. Can they put it together for another year? Like that's something that stands out to me with Will Levis and Chris Rodriguez. I know they lost Wendell Robinson. But how do they make up for it on the offensive side, Michael? I think the Eastern Division is going to be fun next year just because there's so many unknowns.
Now, you kind of touched on this when we were talking about the transfer portal, but, hey, we're calling Lane Kiffin the portal king for a reason. I mean, they are just basically doing a better job than anybody in the SEC of just acquiring talent via the transfer portal. But, staff turnover, elite players headed off to the NFL. How sustainable do you think this is for Lane Kiffin? And, I'll be honest, they surprised the hell out of me going 10-2 and second in the West. Is it realistic that maybe Lane Kiffin's just that good of a coach, but can they stay atop the SEC West, you think, for another season, given all the turnover, but getting aided by the transfer portal?
That's an interesting question because you see the work that they put in when it came to the portal. And you look at the positions that they went out and got. I think, the big thing to me was tight end, was running back and quarterback. And I think that's obvious with what they're trying to replace on the offensive side of the football. To me, it's kind of poignant that he would, complain about certain things with NIL, but then go out and land all these high-profile recruits. And, it's overall funny. But I think Lane Kiffin sometimes just like to complain to get under people's skin.
Right.
But I look at this thing, and I don't know about sustained success. Like, do I think Ole Miss can come back next year and top what they did this year? It's going to be very hard to do. It really is. When you look at the way the division of the West lines up and the amount of wins that they had last year and breaking the school record, like, it's going to be tough. Like, I don't know if I see Ole Miss coming out winning 11 games next season. Mm-hmm. But you look at them and the way they can be competitive inside that division, especially with the offense. I thought the defense played pretty well this year. I thought they took steps at time in the right direction. But they're going to have to, you're going to have to bring in your talent. You have to get them up to speed, during spring practice and after during the summer, and see if it all fits together. And if it does, Lane Kiffin's hoping that Jackson Dart come in and be that guy that they need for next season. And if they can get the production out of Zach Evans at running back and make him that Alvin Kamara type of player at Ole Miss, then I think that you will see some success. But I think overall right now, he's trying to keep up. And can he do the same thing this year as he did last year? It's going to be tough, but don't put anything, I guess, past Lane Kiffin.
Now, how long do you think it'll be before Brian Kelly's got LSU turned into an SEC contender? Because, it's probably unfair to demand that year one, but he is such a good coach. I mean, they were saying when they hired him, he's got the best resume of any coach LSU's ever hired, and I think that's accurate to say. And the Tigers are never far from having the most talent in the SEC. How long do you think before the Tigers are ready to compete in the SEC under Brian Kelly?
I still think it's going to be a minute. I think that, look, I think this team has talent on this roster to come out next season and be pretty darn competitive against some of the top teams. I do. Now, coming in and competing for a national championship in the first year, no, I think that LSU is going to have to fight for that and kind of build that back up in a sense. I think that they do have talent at running back. They do have talent, at the wide receiver position. But I don't want to call this like a huge rebuild. I don't. Because when you're the head coach in the state of Louisiana, you should be able to go pluck players out of that state without a problem. Mm-hmm. You know how it is in Louisiana. It's such a fertile ground for high school players, and the talent that comes out of that state, it should be handled, and it shouldn't be too terribly hard. Now, we've seen that go in different directions this season, especially in the last recruiting cycle. Can Brian Kelly make up for that now that he's there and he's been there for a minute? Okay, get things going for the 23 class. But I think overall, when you look at next year, this quarterback questions, how does that play out on the field? What's it look like when it comes to, your defensive side of the ball, which at times last year, let's face it, they just looked bad, Michael. And that's where they've got work to do. So I like that staff that he's brought in, but I'm very interested in the culture fit in the Southeastern Conference, in Baton Rouge, how this is going to play out in the long run. And I want to see overall how this squad can come back from a season where there were so many disappointments. And can this program turn the page with the new head coach and do it in the first year? I think that's going to be difficult, but watch out second, third year as Brian Kelly starts getting some of his guys in.
Now, last team I wanted to ask you about, Trey, The Arkansas Razorbacks, I mean, hardly anybody talks about them. There's not a bunch of big storylines coming out this offseason. I think that's perfect for Sam Pittman and company because there's, people were after their coordinators. They were able to keep them. I think they've got the best duo of coordinators in the SEC in Kendall Briles and Barry Odom. I think KJ Jefferson is a legitimate Heisman dark horse candidate. I don't understand how most people look at him and don't see a great player. What do you think about the Razorbacks heading into year 3 under Sam Pittman, who they just keep getting better and better? You're not going to find someone that'll hype up Arkansas more than me, yet even they exceeded my expectations last season. Can they continue to do that in the rugged SEC West?
I like Arkansas, and I like the blue-collar mentality of Arkansas, which, look, it's always been like that. When you got a coordinator like Kendall Briles, you got a coordinator like Barry Odom taking care of the defense. I watched Arkansas a lot this year, and it was a fun team to watch. And that's rare to say about Arkansas, because usually they're just gritty, in the dirt, run the football, going to get you on the line of scrimmage type of team. But KJ Jefferson, man, he was so much fun this year. And I look at what this team can do next season. They built such a big platform this year. I think Sam Pittman deserved everything he got. In the way that they went out, in the way that they competed against teams, you're only taking a step further next year. I think this is a squad that, look, it's unfortunate, that Arkansas is in the West. I mean, with the teams you have to compete against every year in A&M and LSU and Alabama, some years Auburn, Ole Miss. But you look at what Arkansas was able to do this year, and you just have to think positive about them in 2022, because especially if they can run the football along with KJ Jefferson, spread it out from a wide receiver standpoint. And what I like about Arkansas so much is they're versatile in their play calling. You're not getting the same thing every single play. You're not getting, the play action. You're not just getting a straight, inside zone. Kendall Briles, he blows it up every now and then. And they can beat you deep. They can beat you with their legs. And I think along the defensive line front and what they could do at linebacker, can they take that next step next season and be a solid unit where you're not having to, let's say, get in any kind of shootouts? Because they started the 2022 year so good. And it was fun to watch Arkansas football again. We all remember that Texas game and how that went, how much fun that was. And the way that they played during the year, they might have taken an L, but they never took a step back as a team as a whole. And I think that's one of the biggest things and compliments you can give Sam Pittman and how he's rallied the squad. So I look forward to watching Arkansas. I think this is a football team that's heading in the right direction. I like Sam Pittman. And the biggest thing to me in this day and age of college football, and I think you'll agree with this, sometimes if you come in and you think, okay, maybe this guy's not head coaching material, but what he does is he surrounds himself with a staff that can get everything else done, and one person can be the CEO. And I think that's what you're seeing out of Sam Pittman, where he's delegating, and he's doing a good job by not meddling in it, with the offensive side, or what Barry Odom is doing with the defensive side. They're letting them be their own coaches, and I think that's key for what Arkansas is trying to do and sustain success at that program, especially from the transfer portal and in recruiting. So I look forward to Arkansas. I don't know if they take a step back. I think they continue going in the right direction.
All right, Trey, I really appreciate all your time. I love talking SEC football with you, and I can't thank you enough for joining me again. So everybody, you got to give Trey a follow at Trey Wallace _ on Twitter, and check out all the great work he does for Outkick.com. Thanks again, Trey. I owe you one.
Hey, brother, I look forward to doing this down the road. Spring football, it's crazy enough it is, but it's almost here. We're getting closer day by day. So I look forward to doing it again, man. Thank you for having me.
All right, so just want to say thanks again to Trey for hopping on the line. Again, give him a follow at Trey Wallace _, and you can find that in the show notes. make it very, very easy for you to give Trey a follow and all the outstanding work he does over at Outkick.com. I hope SEC fans appreciated that one. Now, quickly here around the league, before my back gives out here and I'm on the floor stretching again, we did have one bit of news here I thought was pretty interesting. Let's kick it to Columbia, Missouri, where Eli Drinkwitz, going into his third season as the Tigers head coach, he's going to have his third defensive coordinator because Steve Wilks is leaving for the NFL after just one season. Now, there was reports that Steve Wilks was trying to get the New York Giants defensive coordinator position. He wasn't able to land that job, but he has been hired by the Carolina Panthers, a team that he's got a lot of experience with. He was formerly longtime defensive assistant with the Panthers, going back this time to work for Matt Rule there with the Panthers, and he is going to be the defensive passing game coordinator, secondaries coach for the Panthers this season. And I know a lot of SEC fans immediately wrote this guy off as a bust at the college level, and I don't blame you if you did, because Missouri was so poor on defense to start the season. This is something we touched on about a month ago, but if you trailed off and you didn't follow Missouri at the tail end of the season, I mean, it was like a light switched here. They fired the defensive line coach, and the running game was one of the best in the SEC for the final month of the season. So I've read these stats before. I'm going to read them again. To start the season, August and September, Missouri allowed 271 rushing yards per game, dead last in the SEC. I mean, that's just pitiful. And then it got even worse in October once they got into SEC play. 296 rushing yards allowed per game. Again, dead last in the SEC. And at that point, you're wondering, my God, is Steve Wilks going to get fired before his first season? And this is when they fired the defensive line coach. And, you're thinking, well, this could be one and done, which, in fact, it was one and done. But in November, 120 rushing yards allowed by the Missouri Tigers, fourth best in the SEC. And I know what you're thinking. You're saying, well, hell, they probably had a light schedule. No, and that was their toughest stretch, only month that featured all SEC opponents, including Georgia. Of course, went on to win the national championship. The Missouri Tigers held the Bulldogs to their lowest rushing total in 2 seasons. They faced South Carolina, which was, hot and cold at the running attack there at the tail end of the season. But, they faced Florida, which running the ball was about all they could do. Arkansas led the SEC in rushing. That was their other November opponent. So, I wouldn't say that losing Steve Wilks is good by any means. They do have Blake Baker, who they recently hired off of LSU staff. He's been a defensive coordinator at Miami. So if Drinkwitz wants to keep with an in-house candidate, Blake Baker makes a ton of sense. I don't know if that's going to be the move specifically or not. And I did want to note that Steve Wilks had a clause in his contract. If he were to leave Missouri for the NFL, he doesn't leave. He doesn't owe Missouri any buyout. And he had a big contract. I think he was making over $1 million at Missouri. So this is a hit, certainly. I think the Steve Wilks system and those players, they grasped what he was trying to get the tail end of the season. Could have led to a big season next year. Now, Drinkwitz and company, and credit Drinkwitz here. I'll throw up his message here on the YouTube page. But, he seemed very appreciative of Steve Wilks for coming down to Columbia and coaching up the defense. But that was something that he kind of preached all last off season. And I think it helped him in recruiting, certainly, where these other SEC schools and rivals of Missouri said, well, hell, we can get you to the NFL. That was, that's the pitch everybody makes in recruiting. But with Steve Wilks, we said, hey, we got a guy here that's been in the NFL, lived it, breathed it. He's going to teach you what you need to know a hell of a lot better than these other coaches that have no NFL experience. And certainly that pitch had to work because we had the best recruiting class in Missouri history here. So, that's something where, I'm not sitting here saying losing Steve Wilks, Eli Drinkwitz is not going to be able to recruit anymore, because considering, his ties to the NFL, he probably wasn't, and this is just a guess on my part, but I would say he's probably not the best recruiter in the world just because he hadn't been doing it for so long. So maybe Hell, Missouri may even get better when it comes to recruiting aspect, but unless they hire another former NFL head coach, former NFL defensive coordinator, they're probably going to lose that pitch on the recruiting trail. So it's going to be pretty interesting to see who Eli Drinkwitz hires to be his defensive coordinator. That'll be a story to watch with spring camp just a month or so away in Columbia. Now, last little item I wanted to hit at, I just thought this was fascinating and something that, this happened while we were on vacation. So I am trying to get to many of these things that we missed as possible. So let's kick it all down to Tuscaloosa, where, man, we've got so many new coaching hires here on Nick Saban's staff. Doug Marrone, the offensive line coach, former NFL coach, back to the NFL. I think he took the job with the Raiders, maybe. I don't know. Once they leave the SEC, I don't keep track of them anyway, but that's not the important thing. The important thing is they've turned around and they've hired several new faces on the Alabama staff. And it starts with Eric Wolford, who was at Kentucky last year to be the offensive line coach to replace Doug Marrone. They hired a name all SEC fans should be familiar with, Travaris Robinson, who was at Miami last year. Now he's going to be the new corners coach. He's been at South Carolina, Auburn. He's been at Florida. I mean, he's been all over the SEC. Now you're getting an experienced guy who, he was not a very good defensive coordinator for South Carolina, but if you're just asking him to coach cornerbacks, he's a Miami native. That's a key area for the Crimson Tide to recruit. He should be a hell of a corners coach for the Crimson Tide. They have also added Coleman Hutzler, special teams coordinator, who last year was at Ole Miss, and I believe he was previously a special teams coordinator of the year, according to Football Scoop. A really, really good special teams coordinator. And last but not least, Joe Cox, former Georgia quarterback, is going to be the new tight ends coach at Alabama. And what do all those guys have in common? Eric Wolford, Travaris Robinson, Coleman Hutzler, and Joe Cox. They're members of the Will Muschamp coaching tree at South Carolina. All these guys were on staff at one point or another, and I believe all of them together on Will Muschamp's staff at South Carolina, which is just bizarre that now they're all in Tuscaloosa coaching. And it's interesting because, I've had this question posed to me this offseason by a friend of the show, Old School Cock, love that name, big South Carolina fan, wondering not even about Alabama, but Georgia. Got so many former South Carolina assistants. Will Muschamp, obviously. Mike Bobo now. They just hired Brian McClendon. Why do these coaches that failed at South Carolina, why are they getting all these other chances? Why are these Alabama and Georgia, the two perceived juggernauts of the conference, why are they giving these guys an opportunity who basically fell flat on their ass at South Carolina? How much sense does that make? And here's the thing, I say this all the time. Players matter a hell of a lot more than coaches. That's not to say you can have just some idiot coach. Otherwise, Derek Dooley would have been pretty good at Tennessee. But players matter more. And you'll be amazed how good these coaches are that failed at South Carolina. All due respect to the Gamecocks, because I know they put a number of players in the NFL, some of the best players in the SEC at specific positions. But at Georgia, at Alabama, they're going to have a talent advantage over damn near everybody they play. And that's going to make these coaches look a hell of a lot better than they looked at South Carolina. And that's what it is at the end of the day. It's all about the players. And why is Nick Saban the greatest of all time? I'm not trying to take anything away from him, but he's probably the best recruiter of all time. He's an evaluator. He's a developer. He's got all those traits. He's a fantastic in-game coach. But nobody, until I would argue Kirby Smart, has been able to recruit to his level until now. So I know Jimbo's right there. So, I mean, there's guys that compete with Nick Saban, but nobody's done it as well as Nick Saban for as long as Nick Saban. And that has been the key to his success. And now he's doing it in the transfer portal. And that's the last thing I want to close on here. Let's throw a little fire on this Alabama-Georgia rivalry, because Nick Saban, during his National Signing Day press conference, was asked about these transfers coming in. Eli Ricks, of course, from LSU. Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech, And Jermaine Burton from Georgia. Why is Burton coming to Alabama from the national champions? A lot of people got that question. Nick Saban gave you his thoughts on it.
You know, Jermaine Burton was somebody that we recruited out of high school that we thought was a really, really good player. He had a fairly productive, year at Georgia. They have a lot of good players at his position, and, he had some production this year, but, probably might have seen a better opportunity because we're a little bit more wide open and throw the ball more with a good quarterback. That may have been his intention, but, we feel like, we lost, both starting receivers and Slade, two to the draft and Slade. So, to get a more experienced player that has some playing time in this league probably is a good thing for us, and we like his ability, and, hopefully he'll be able to be very productive for us.
All right, so, hey, Nick Saban is not someone that's going to out here and criticize players publicly, and he may do it behind closed doors and all that. So I don't think he was necessarily calling out Stetson Bennett or anything, or even Kirby Smart in the offense, but it is interesting. He's basically saying Jermaine Burton will be a better receiver for us than he will be at Georgia. Now, that remains to be seen whether that'll be the case or not, but, it's tough to argue Bryce Young, anyone against Bryce Young, but I just thought these were some interesting comments that, like I said, maybe add a little fuel to the fire between Georgia and Alabama this offseason. A little trash talk. That Georgia-Florida trash talk has died down a little bit. Now we got Alabama and Georgia going at it all day, every day on the social media, and maybe this will add a little bit to that this week. But, hey, that's all I got on this episode. I got a terrific guest lined up for tomorrow's show. Should be a really, really good one. And so look forward to that. We were going to have one more show before the week's up. I do appreciate each and every one of you for checking us out. And if you made it this far, as always, give us that 5-star written review on the Apple Podcast app, or now on the Spotify. You can rate us 5-star. You do that, send that on over to that secpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll send you a beer koozie free of charge. We got all 14 SEC teams represented in a beer koozie. So that's going to do it for this episode of the show. Catch you on the next one.